the world government in One Piece and the aftermath after the floods of the times of Noah. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to part 2. I'm basically explaining to you how I feel One Piece has not only explained how things went down in around the times of Noah, plus the flood, plus what came after, plus what's to come for us today. There is a reason I'm explaining all of this through a creative medium, right? Because it's just make-believe, right? Right. So let's continue. We're going to talk about the world government. So I finished off in the previous video. Go check out the playlist. There's going to be a playlist. There has to be one, right? Go and check out the first video to get why this is all happening. And now we're here. So in One Piece, they have a world government. Now, once again, my questions, I ask a lot of questions. I think we're coming to that conclusion today. I ask a lot of questions. And one of the questions that I like to ask a lot is who, what, where, when, how, and why, as I said in the previous video. So one of my questions in One Piece, and I paid a lot of attention to, is who put this, how did this world government come together? Who was in it? And what was there before? Now, as I said to you, I'm spoiling things, but you just got to run with it, right? Because the world government then leads to the what become the two sides in the show, which is essentially the pirates versus the government, right? Versus the world government. And the reason why I think this is so interesting is because a lot of times, like I said to you guys, there's always two sides. So for me, with anything and everything, I always try to identify what are the two sides. So like with religion, the two sides are the believers in Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, and then everybody else. That's the two sides, right? In this, those are the two sides. You've got the government and then you've got the pirates. So I gave you a bit of a background about the pirates, and now we're going over to the world government, right? Because I believed from the beginning of early into watching One Piece, I was like, I know they're about to tell some truths that are real about what's happening in the world. And that's why I've been so glued into it and felt like it was such a valuable use of my time. So the world government has technically structured like this. So you have 20 leaders of 20 different kingdoms. So they all have their own islands. And what I love about One Piece, and I just shout out to Oda again, he's an incredible story writer. Every island has something a bit different about them, something that they do. So you have Whole Cake Island. Whole Cake Island, it's an island that's all made of food. So you got like the chocolates area, then you got like the area that's made of this. Of course, one of the Big Mom, who's one of the big pirates who's been there for a long time, one of the OGs. That's her island because she does eat everything, and a lot of her storyline, her background and whatever surrounding her eating and also her powers, because one of the things that she does is she taxes the people on her island by taking like 10% of their life force so that she can then animate and create an army, not just from people, her kids, because she has kids with all these different men who I think she then like disposes of somehow. And so her kids make up her army. And then she also puts these souls into physical objects. So there'll be like trees that will be in part of her army and things like that, right? And everything's like basically edible, right? And then you have another island altogether, like Fishman Island. They're all fit like half men, half fish. Their island is actually underwater to get there. And they can be on land and underwater. They were very much enslaved by the world government. And this is going to become a really big concept, the concept of just slavery and power and all of this, right? Because just run with me, everyone, run with me. So yeah, so the slavery and all of that. So they very much are now underground. Their dream as a nation is to be able to like let their island come back to the surface. And one of the main theories, I should say, as to how they ended up there in the first place is because of this flood that happened around this 100-year void of information that we don't know about. Right? So that's the fishermen people, but they want to be back to the surface. That's their dream as a nation, to come back to the surface. And, and again, the pirates, it's funny because the pirates and the government, like the high level pirates kind of work with the government. And I'm going to break down that structure for you right now. So we'll start with the 20 kingdoms. So you have 20 kingdoms, and in these different 20 kingdoms, and they're specific kingdoms, not all kingdoms are part of this government. And pretty much whatever happened in this void 100 years ago, this big cataclysmic event, which is actually how it's being referred to as a cataclysm, just like how 12,400 years ago, the archaeologists of today say there was a cataclysm, right? The last ice age, where these meteors came out from outer space and came and melted the icebergs, and then the sea level rose by 400 feet, right? And there's the same theme about how certain places and certain things got lost under the sea, as far as One Piece. So, for example, there's the Kingdom of Wano. The Kingdom of Wano is where all the samurai come from. Their lineage is very much one of the, like, you know, ancient kingdoms, if you will, because there's this concept of the ancient kingdoms and these ancient kingdoms being lost, right? And these ancient kingdoms had these special powers. So, for example, in Fishman Island, which, like I said, is underneath in the water, they have a mermaid. She's one of what they call, what do they call them? What do they call them? They're like the ancient weapons. So there's 3 ancient weapons, which, again, interestingly named Pluton, Poseidon, and what's the other one? Uranus, right? And it's funny how I've said to you guys before that I have all these, like, looking at like the floods of Noah, what happened to the Watcher Angels when they got sent. Some of them got sent as put as stars up in the sky and all these different things. I've told you that how these Greek gods and these myths and legends that we're taught in school as fakes and fables and whatever the hex or whatever's, right? I believe existed, but for real. I believe there was a Poseidon. I believe there was a Hercules, whatever. Albeit, I believe a lot of them, it was like the stories are like the same one in different names. We did this before when I talked about how Hercules in what is it? Hercules, in terms of Romans, and then it was Hercules, I think, for the Greeks, or the other way around. And then is the same god that's the king, the same god that's the god of Jezebel in the Bible, the Phoenicians, right? And again, Phoenicians, what are they doing on the sea? So again, fishermen people underwater. This ancient weapon turns out to be a mermaid, because what she can do is whoever is the ancient weapon, I think that one is Poseidon, of course Poseidon. So whoever's Poseidon underneath this mermaid, right, can command what they call the sea. What are they called? The sea. Oh my gosh. These big, huge sea creatures. So basically, in the water, right, you have areas in One Piece where they are too dangerous to go because they have these sea beasts, and I can't remember what they're called, right? And basically, they're like giant, gargantuan versions of like other sea creatures that literally, if you're a boat, like even say you're like one of these big, huge, like the Navy admiral ships, if the ship like was to like get caught up under this, the ship would be like a dot in comparison to the size of these things. So again, like a megalodon, like a Loch Ness monster, like a kraken, right? We've seen what we're saying. So Poseidon, she has the power to command the sea beasts, right? Which is an insane power in terms of the times of war. And again, these underwater thingies. And going back to Wano, because Wano is another interesting one, right? Because in Wano, and the government wants to get a hold of all of these ancient weapons. That's why I'm mentioning this, right? Wano is, so the fishermen people are one of the original ancient kingdoms. They're ancient kingdoms that they tried to get rid of, that then either became isolated or enslaved, right? So keep that in your mind, right? Then you go to Wano. Wano is actually higher above ground than other islands. And the reason for that is they built these walls like to protect themselves during the times of this flood. And so the island, like if you can imagine that they've got this, it's surrounded by these huge walls. So it's basically almost impossible to get in or out, right? They've got these huge walls around, and then there's all this amount of water. I don't know how many feet, but it's like there's a whole village. The actual land of Wano is actually underwater. Then there's like this big, huge like mountaintop, and then they've built on top of there, within the span of the walls, a new Wano, and that's where they live. And the land of Wano is the land of the samurai. And they also apparently have another one of the ancient weapons, which is this potentially theorized could be this creature that can not only transport people underground, but build underground tunnels. Are we seeing how, can we see, and like this is all stuff I've learned, like I think in 2021, like a lot of, 2025, a lot of the stuff I'm saying. Then you have the other ancient weapon, Uranus, which apparently wait, did I just say that was Uranus or Pluton? Right? Anyway, I'm getting confused. But the point is, there's different lands. Some of them have the original 20 kings. So the original 20 kings and queens were the ones who came together at the end of whatever this cataclysm was, right? 800 years ago, according to where you start in One Piece. And they all decided we're all going to have peace. And what they did is they put together this throne where there was an empty throne, and they all bar one, stuck a sword. Well, they should have all at the time, but they all put a sword in to the ground, all of the kings and queens, to say, no one's going to be the number one ruler of all of us, but we're all going to agree here that we'll come and meet. So they have this thing called, I think it's the Reverie, where they meet periodically as like the 20 kingdoms to discuss just what's going on, but not really to say that we're all doing the same thing, but more just to keep each other updated and to show respect and to keep some level of order, right? Above them is these 5 different, what are they called? There's different names for them, but well, I can't I don't know how to describe them, but they're these 5 men, essentially in suits. They are like the second highest rank in One Piece, right? And they are the ones who have all of these extra rights, like that are like above the law. Because what happens? They're not the Celestial Dragons. Are they the Celestial Dragons? I don't think so. Because there's like a royal So in One Piece, there's a place where it's called Marriage. How is it called? How do you say it? Marriage. I can never say it properly. But anyway, so this is where they all live. You've got the royal families who have a birthright to be royal, right? And of course, they're ugly, crusty, dusty people that are horrible, that use humans and everything as slaves, that get to treat everybody however they want to be treated, however they want to treat them. They're so-called the royal family, right? They get to do whatever they want. They live in this place. And this is also where there's these 5 governmental figures, right? Who are the ones really making the decisions. The men in black at the top, you know what I mean? Kind of vibes, you know what I'm saying? The people like, I would equate it to like in the United Kingdom, how, you know, we see out and about, you know, the Charleses and the Williams and the whoever's, but realistically speaking, there's a bunch of people behind the scenes, I forget the name, who are really the ones making a lot of the decisions and preparing a lot of the things that we'll never get to see. These guys are kind of those guys, and they have a lot of, basically their decision overrides anything, and they can essentially at any point do whatever they want. So there's been shown at multiple times that these 5 guys have either fought. One thing we know is that at least a few of them fought in the whatever was happening in this 800 years ago, right? Because we'll come back to how I figured this out really early on in a second, right? But they all of them what was I going to say? What was I actually going to say? Oh, I'll just get straight to the point. Basically, long and short of it is, they're not people. They're like chimeras. So one of them's like half buffalo, half spider. The other one's like half horse. Like they shapeshift, right? Which, can I tell you, this is the most satisfying moment of One Piece, because I knew this was coming. I knew there was something sus about them, and I knew there was something about them where they had like survived in some form of a way and were like some kind of a not human something, which is why they were considered, you know, these top 5, whatever they are. So towards the end of One Piece, something happened and we saw them shapeshift. And I was like, yeah, I knew it. I knew that was what was going to happen. And then above them, there's this overlord or over mistress, I don't know, called Imu, who's very weird, right? Because you can't see who they are. All you see is these big, like this big cape, and underneath what looks like horns, and then these really scary looking red eyes. Now, Imu, the reason why this is a big deal is Imu goes to sit on the throne. So this agreement that was made by the 20 kingdoms 800 years ago and has continued on through generation after generation, no one sits on the throne. Secretly, no one knows that Imu has been sitting on this throne, and Imu has taken control of the world. Why am I mentioning all of that, and why is that relevant, and why is that relevant to the Floods of No? Well, it seems Imu, more than anyone, and these 5 in the government have some reason why they don't want people to understand the history that took place during this cataclysm 800 years ago. They have purposefully destroyed history. So like I said, one of the members of the Straw Hat Pirates, Nico Robin, she came from the island where they were known to be archaeologists, right? So they were these archaeologists, and they also had a tree, and in there was a library with all the history. They were the only people who could read the language on the poneglyphs, which are the same as hieroglyphs, which are dotted around the world in this case. So it's either that it's going to tell you how to get towards the One Piece, which is why it's all called One Piece, and we still don't even know what the One Piece is, right? Although I kind of have my kind of thoughts, right? But yeah, so they, because those guys had started to figure out the history, they were the most intelligent, these archaeologists. what the government did is they did this thing called a buster call, right? Which is where essentially the whole of the army of the Navy shows up and completely obliterates an entire island. And it's been seen that some of these ancient weapons have been used to do similar things. So in one of the previous story arcs that I just watched, it was made known that one of the characters that knew more was on a particular island, and these five top level government, what are they called? They're called like mountains or like dragons. There's different. Obviously, the translation is difficult when it's because I don't want to disrespect Oda's hard work that he's been doing for literally decades. They literally just called and they were like, destroy the island, and they have the power to just destroy an island, make it disappear. They were like, delete it from history. And then they have their own little secret factions like CP9, CP0, and they go off and they have their own little things that they get to do, to eradicate. So like one of the things is they all are trying to catch Nico Robin because she's the last one who can read the poneglyphs, and she managed to escape, which a lot of the giants came together to support, because there's also an island of giants called Elf. What is it called? Elbaf, which I believe was modeled after, because all of these different characters are all after specific people in history. So like Luffy is kind of somewhat inspired by like a Napoleon type of character. Like they all have their own little things. It's so interesting. So anyways, all in all, we have Emu, we have the 5 mountains or dragons or whatever they're called, the ones who shapeshift and whatever. Then they have their little like secret group of people that do the work directly with them, that are all out doing like CIA type, classified type missions. Then you got the 20 kingdoms who come together and do their agreements and whatever. And then you have the Navy. Now the Navy listens all to these five mountains, and these 5 mountains are above the Navy. So they get to make whatever decision they want. The Navy just has to follow what they're doing, which actually makes it really interesting and very similar to the world of today, because a lot of the people who join the Navy, they join for good reasons, right? They join because they want to do right by the people. They have a sense of justice. They have a sense of wanting to protect their country and their people. Unfortunately, because they pledged their allegiance and they have now, given over their agreement to these people, they are finding themselves, the show really depicts how well that these people in power, how that can be really taken advantage of when it comes to the world at large. Because like before all of this, right, because these 5 people and these 20 people and all these people that came together to form the world government, this is all to create peace, right? It's like what we hear in history. People are like, we went to certain places to civilize them, or we had to do this to bring order in the world, to bring whatever. Or because what was happening before, and what was it before that was such a threat to you? And that's what we're going to come to in all of this. And that's what links it back to Noah, because I feel like the reason why that people don't know about the stuff that happens in the times of Noah really in the world is, I believe, the history has been removed and hidden on purpose by the people in power, who are now taking advantage of the lack of the knowledge that the rest of us have, and are utilizing their connections with these spiritual beings, creatures, and their knowledge of the history from before to wreak havoc. And then we're left with the people at the bottom. You've got the Navy versus the pirates, who have to find a way where they both have a sense of something, but they both have it. Well, let's talk about that separately. We'll talk about the Navy versus the pirates, and good versus evil, and all of that. Because I'm not going to lie, this started to make me really rethink the whole story of Noah's Ark, and like who was really the bad guys and what was really the threats, and like, anyways, we're going to come to that. We're going to talk next, in the next video, I'm going to talk about the Navy versus the pirates, because these are the people who are actually on the ground. These are the people doing the actual work. And I just think there's a lot of very interesting characters that remind me also of how the power is always with the people. And so we'll get onto that in part 3. And don't worry, guys, listen, there's a lot to unpack here. This show was 1,122 episodes I watched of One Piece. Well, I did skip some of the filler episodes, but yeah. So there's a lot to unpack here, but it's all good food for thought. Regardless, just trust me that it's good food for thought, because it kind of puts things into perspective. And then if you do go and watch it, you'll have some kind of like a starting point mentally as to how to start to like unpack exactly what's happening. But yeah, we're going to talk about the Navy versus the pirates, and the power is always with the people. Okay, because if life's a game, let's play to win. God bless you all. God loves you. I love you. And I'll see you in my next one.